In Talking to Oneself, Michael Williams explores the art of the monologue.
When the ball was at its height, on that still and tropic night, she thought of him and hastened to his room. As she crossed the barrack square, she could hear the dreamy air of a waltz tune softly stealing through the gloom. His door was open wide, with silver moonlight shining through. The place was wet and slippy where she trod, for an ugly knife lay buried in the heart of Mad Carew. 'Twas the vengeance of that little yellow god. So there's a one-eyed yellow idol to the north of Kathmandu. There's a little marble cross below the town. There's a broken-hearted woman tends the grave of Mad Carew, and that yellow god forever gazes down.
The Green Eye of the Little Yellow God, feelingly declaimed by Bransby Williams, or as one less than respectful contemporary called him, Gransby Bilious. It's difficult to take that sort of thing seriously nowadays, isn't it? Billy Bennett certainly didn't.
There's a cock-eyed yellow poodle to the north of Gongapooch. There's a little hot rust bun that's turning green. There's a double-jointed woman doing tricks in Choo Chin Chow. And you're a better man than I am, Gonga Din. That's your cue.
Monologue. The very word conjures up dusty church halls and cringe-making worthiness. Maybe so, but fashions change. In entertainment, as in anything else. Victorians happily sat through magic lantern slides, refined penny readings, temperance lectures, phrenology demonstrations, long-winded fustian dramas, so why not a meaty poem or two? Here's Albert Chevalier with The Fallen Star, acting like it was going out of style.
I thrilled me audience. Freedom as they never had been thrilled, and filled the theatre nightly as it never had been felt. Right through the mighty gamut of emotions I could range, from classic Julius Caesar to the idiot of the Grange. 30 years ago, I was someone in the show, and now I pass unrecognized in crowded streets or bars. The firmament of fame holds no record of my name, the name of a fallen star.
Albert Chevalier was a rare example of a straight actor going on the halls, and the fact that he had been legitimate made him a favoured entertainer in polite society, taking his cosy little songs and pathetic monologues to all the select salons and grand ballrooms of the metropolis. He was billed as the Kipling of the halls, though whether Rudyard Kipling was flattered by this appropriation of his name and reputation is unlikely. Militarism and the steadfastness of John Bull was standard fare for the monologuist, as was a very beady attitude towards Johnny Foreigner. Witness such stirring titles as The Tale of Ahmed Kurd, The Pigtail of Li Fang Fu, The Yogi's Curse, and the poem with which we started, The Green Eye of the Little Yellow God, by J. Milton Hayes. But surely the speaking of a poem is a recitation, not a monologue. Well, a monologue, strictly defined, is simply one person talking. So does that include sports commentaries, news bulletins, weather reports, political speeches, Hamlet's soliloquy? Surely these aren't monologues. And what about monodramas? One person plays like Krapp's Last Tape or Shirley Valentine. And then there's comedian's patter. Where does that fit in?
I like the girls who do. I like the girls who don't. I hate the girl who says she will, and then she says she won't. But the girl I like the best of all, and I think you'll sound right, is the girl who says she never does, but she looks as though she... Yeah, do you know what I'm doing?
No. Even Max Miller, at his earthiest, can't make that a monologue, just because it's in rhyme. This is more what we're talking about.
There's no place on the face of the earth like the Tower of London. If you've never been there, go again. It's a glorious place. Everything old. Now, in the first place, when you visit the Tower of London, it's free. But you have to pay a shilling to go in. And the first ancient item you see is the man that takes the money at the door. Then you pass through the refreshment room, which is the oldest refreshment room in the tower, and the only one. And there's some very ancient items in the refreshment room, such as the buns and ginger beer and the barmaids and whatnot. Good day, ladies. Do you wish to see the tower? Splendid day to see the tower, nice and gloomy. Oh, yes, I can show you around the tower. Of course, I'm not allowed to do so, but I can do so. Now, in the first place, this is the refreshment room. Of course, if you want anything in the refreshment room, of course, now is the time. You don't care for anything. No, thank you. Only as we go along, there's no oranges or ginger beer to be had, and of course, you feel faint, you have to come back to the refreshment room. You don't care. No, don't want anything. No, I do. Still, we'll proceed. Standing with our backs to the refreshment room, we get a lovely view of the tower. Follow me, ladies. Standing with your back to the tower, you get a lovely view of the refreshment room. Now, you see that man over there? That's the sentry. He stands there night and day with his gun fixed, bayonet fixed, and his eye always on one spot, and that is the refreshment room. For it's a splendid time to see the empty house. Everything is free, and there's nothing for to pay. But if you haven't got a bob or two, you'd better stay away from the good old Tower of London.
Dan Leno in a routine which caused Edward VII to seriously strain his waistcoat buttons with mirth, and one which can be called a monologue, even if it does finish with a song. Dan Leno was offering no mere string of gags, but a carefully considered work-through characterization. He was being Dan Leno, of course, but he was also offering his inimitable lovableness filtered through a fictitious persona, the yeoman warder. In the song and supper rooms of late Georgian and early Victorian London, the spoken word was represented by the likes of Charles Sloman and William Unsworth. Charles Sloman billed himself as the only English improvisatore, though today his improvisations would fall foul of the Trade Descriptions Act. Having been asked to extemporize on, say, Lord Palmerston, the improvisation might take this form.
I take my hat off to Lord Palmerston, for he is a good man and true. When put to the test, he's one of the best. So here's to the red, white and blue.
It becomes apparent that all the improvisatore had to do was to change the name. At most, he had only to improvise the middle two lines, a dodge which only had limited appeal. For Charles Sloman ended his days in the Strand Union Workhouse in 1870, at the age of 62. William Unsworth was known as a stump orator. His burlesque discourses were also enlivened by topical allusions. Here, for instance, are his thoughts on Darwin's theories of evolution.
And yet they tell us man is more like a monkey every day. Now, what is a monkey? Is it a fish? No. Is it a fowl? No. Is it a good red herring? It is not. A monkey is an inhabitant of woods and forests. Have we not seen some splendid specimens of this kind of ape? Am I right, or any other man?
So, having looked at a few examples of the spoken voice, let's attempt a narrower definition of our subject. A monologue is a sharply profiled thumbnail sketch which can be expressed in verse or prose. How about that? Within this framework, the performer can choose tragedy, comedy, history, pastoral, pastoral-comical, historical-pastoral, tragical-historical, tragical-comical, historical-pastoral, and all stations west. How would Polonius have categorized this remarkable effusion?
I'm cherishing a secret in my bosom about this dreadful stage life that I lead. I've heard it said that pros are decent people, but according to the papers that I read, both actresses and actors are dead wrong uns, whether from the palace or the hippodrome. The chaps I meet outside know I'm an actor, but I never breathe a word of it at home. So my mother doesn't know I'm on the stage. It would break a poor old heart if she found out. She knows I'm a deserter from the Scottish Fusiliers. She knows I stole a blind man's can, that got me 7 years. She knows I've been connected with a gang of West End pests, and the police have had me twice inside the cage. And she knows I mix with ladies that have got a shady past, but me mother doesn't know I'm on the stage.
Again, the iconoclastic Billy Bennett, almost a gentleman, whose irreverent burlesques would not infrequently drift into the surreal, as indicated by the disgraceful travesty we heard earlier, the green tie on the little yellow dog. My mother doesn't know I'm on the stage shows that even as late as 1929, it was received opinion that the stage was a breeding ground for vice, debauchery, and irresponsibility. If therefore your social status forbade access to the theatre or, heaven forfend, the music hall, then for entertainment you had to fall back upon your own genteel resources. In thousands of over-furnished Victorian drawing rooms, the after-dinner hours would be enlivened and very often deadened by the family soiree. But if you subscribe to Bernard Shaw's view that
hell is full of musical amateurs,
how could you make your contribution to the social whirl? You could perhaps perform a few conjuring tricks, or, better still, you could recite. The market for parlour recitations was vast, and from the 1830s, a Niagara of books, pamphlets, periodicals poured onto an eager market, often with detailed instructions for maximum effectiveness. One of the earliest, from 1835, was
Fanny Hill's bang-up reciter, frisky songster, and amorous toastmaster.
The publisher of this frankly ribald little volume also advertised
5 minutes advice on the venereal disease and how it may be effectually cured in all its stages.
There was little, if anything, in this particular reciter that you would want your servants to read. So let us pass swiftly on to Miss E.M. Corboul's
Guide to the Theory and Practice of the Art of Public Speaking, Reciting, and Reading.
Published in 1909, Miss Corboul's selection of 100 suitable pieces was prefaced with exhaustive instructions in the 12 essential points of elocution.
Respiration, articulation, tone, pause, meter, tune, force, emphasis, inflection, pitch, modulation, and gesture.
In the 1870s, midway between Fanny Hill's Georgian raffishness and Miss Corboul's Edwardian earnestness, George R. Sims produced a number of poems which were to become standard monologue fare. The Lifeboat, Ostler Joe, In the Workhouse Christmas Day, and Billy's Rose. Little Billy is dying. and his 10-year-old sister Nell is scouring the bitter snow-swept streets for his last request, a rose.
With her eyes upcast to heaven, down she sank upon the ground, and she prayed to God to tell her where the roses might be found. Then the cold blast numbed her senses, and her sight grew strangely dim, and a sudden awful tremor seemed to seize her every limb. "Oh, a rose," she moaned. "Good Jesus, just a rose, too tight to bill." And as she prayed, a chariot came thundering down the hill, and a lady sat there toying with a red rose, rare and sweet. As she passed, she flung it from her, and it fell at Nelly's feet. Just a word her lord had spoken caused her ladyship to fret, and the rose had been his present, so she flung it in a pet. But the poor half-blinded Nelly thought it fallen from the skies, and she murmured, "Thank you, Jesus," as she clasped the dainty prize. Lo, that night from out the alley did a child's soul pass away, from dirt and sin and misery to where God's children play. Lo, that night a wild, fierce snowstorm burst in fury o'er the land, and that morn they found Nell frozen with the red rose in her hand. Billy's dead and gone to glory. So is Billy's sister, Nell. Am I bold to say this happened in the land where angels dwell? That the children met in heaven after all their earthly woes, and that Nelly kissed her brother and said, "Billy, here's your rose."
Kenneth Williams with Billy's Rose. Mawkish, morbid, perhaps, but powerful and engaging, you must admit. And we mustn't forget the social conditions prevailing at the time, when such tragedies were not all that improbable. When the charms of the drawing room palled, an evening of wholesome recreation en famille could be safely sampled in the concert hall or assembly rooms. Such a venue would be hallowed by association with the edifying arts of music and oratory, and would customarily be dry. Here gentlemanly lecturers and elocutionists such as Charles Dickens and Clifford Harrison would deploy their talents. Even the cloth did not disdain the platform. Arthur Sketchley, prolific writer and performer of monologues, was in private life the Reverend George Rose. The subject matter of monologues was achingly predictable. Romance, heroism, virtue triumphant, roses round the door. Comic monologues also inhabited a very limited compass. Courting couples, social gaffes, funny foreigners, and clumsy servants. The monologue had also been given a boost by the emergence of the music halls in the 1850s. Initiated at the Canterbury in Lambeth by Charles Morton, these new-styled places of entertainment presented songs and dances, instrumentalists, operatic excerpts, and the occasional novelty act. When it came to the spoken word, however, Morton had to be extremely careful not to fall foul of the law. By the Theatres Act of 1843, a building could be licensed as a theatre or as a music hall, but not both. A theatre could present plays, but not serve refreshments in the auditorium. A music hall could serve refreshments, but not present plays. The question then arose, what was a play? In 1862, Morton presented a one-act musical extravaganza called The Enchanted Hash. Proceedings were instituted by Alfred Wiggin of the Olympic Theatre, who claimed that the piece was a drama. Morton countered by having his performers mime the action, with the dialogue being spoken from the side of the stage by a single actor as explanatory text. Now, legally, a monologue, The Enchanted Hash, infringed the 1843 Act no longer, and Charles Morton kept his license. Sketches on the halls, therefore, had, at least in theory, to eschew dialogue. Hence such troupes as Fred Carnot's Speechless Comedians, two of whom at one time were none other than Charlie Chaplin and Stan Laurel. This remained the position until 1911, by which time the law was more honoured in the breach than the observance. So when the first double licenses were issued, leading play actors felt they could accept lucrative engagements in palaces of variety without losing caste. As we've seen, sketches could only be performed on the halls by one person, giving rise to what were known as protean performers, after Proteus, the mythical Greek prophet who was able to change shape at will. A rich source of material for proteans was, of course, Charles Dickens, with his broadly defined characters in strong situations: pastoral, pastoral comical, historical pastoral, tragical historical. Yes, we've done all that. One of the most distinguished performers in this category was Owen McGivney, who claimed to be
the world's greatest quick-change artiste.
He concocted a scene in which he portrayed Bill Sikes and 4 other roles,
with record-breaking changes.
Whatever that may mean. Alf Barber claimed to perform 24 portrayals in 12 minutes. His talents embraced
ventriloquial sketches, Japanese conjuring, burlesque sketches, marionettes, and representations from Dickens.
Whereas Arabella Allen merely puffed herself as
the Dickens girl.
Mademoiselle von Etter claimed to be
the only lady illusionist, protean, and quick-change artiste.
And she may well have been telling the truth. But to Bransby Williams,
the Hamlet of the halls,
whom we heard at the beginning, must go the palm as the most distinguished and venerable monologuist of them all. He brought not only his Dickens characters to the variety stage, but also Shakespeare, a daring innovation which was surprisingly popular, though few endeavoured to follow his lead. Bransby Williams' long career took him into the television age, and for many years Christmas on BBC television was not complete without his Christmas carol.
It's Christmas Day. Christmas Day, and I haven't missed it after all. A Merry Christmas, Scrooge. A Merry, Merry Christmas to all the world. Now, what shall I do to celebrate this wonderful Christmas? To think that the time before me's me own, wherein to make amends. May God be thanked for the reformation that shall now begin with Ebenezer Scrooge. And now where shall I go? Where shall... There's no one in all the world to welcome Scrooge on Christmas Day. Not one friend in all... Yes, there is. Yes, there is. There's poor old Bob Cratchit. Bob Cratchit, my own poor clerk, with his 15 shillings a week. Aye? Did anybody hear you say 15 shillings a week? How the devil can a man live on 15 shillings a week? I'll double it. I'll begin by doubling it, and then I'll double it again. And then, where's that boy? Boy! Boy! You know that poulterer's at the corner? Aye, you know, where they sell the prize turkeys. Run down to the poulterer's and order that big prize turkey. That's it, the one as big as you. Bring it back here, and I'll give you a shilling for yourself. Walker! He says Walker. Never thought Ebenezer Scrooge would order a prize turkey. Now I'll take that prize turkey to Bob Cratchit, and I'll begin by making them all happy. And only yesterday, as Ebenezer Scrooge walked through the city streets, people would say, "Here, you see who that is? Hey, that's old Scrooge. Ah, wicked old miser." But now, with God's help and strength, they shall say, "Do you see who that is? That's Ebenezer Scrooge, the benevolent and good, the man who cares for the widows and the orphans." And now, in the words of Tiny Tim in me dream, here's a Merry Christmas to all the world, and may God bless us, everyone. To those merry Christmas bells, dear old Christmas bells.
Bransby Williams, who died in 1961, aged 91. In 1888 was published a collection of 12 burlesque monologues, complete with unhelpful tips which laid bare the ludicrousness of the whole business. This was The Young Reciter by F. Anstey, whose popular novel, Vice Versa, in which a father and son swap bodies, had been published the previous year. He was 32 years of age, an Oxford graduate and a barrister, but his whimsical sense of humour wafted him onto the staff of Punch, where he stayed for no less than 43 years. In the 1931 edition of The Young Reciter, C.L. Graves states in his introduction,
I have heard it said by a brilliant writer of light verse that Anstey killed recitation for 30 years. As one who in his early days suffered much from the performance of reciters, juvenile and adults, and then for a blissful interval enjoyed a respite from their activities, I'm inclined to think that the claim is substantially accurate.
The gem of Anstey's spoofs is undoubtedly Burglar Bill, still performed today, though remarkably sometimes straight. On reading the original, it is difficult to see how anyone could consider for a moment taking seriously this lurid tale of a burglar's stony heart being melted by a lisping little girl. But such is the case. Here's just a sample, with stage directions.
Burglar
Now open both eyes very wide.
Bill.
Then go on in a hushed voice and with an air of wonder at the world's iniquity.
Through a window in the attic, brawny Burglar Bill has crept, seeking stealthily a chamber where the jewelry is kept.
Pronounced either jewelry or jewellery according to taste.
He is furnished with a jemmy, centre bit and carpet bag, for the latter comes in handy, so he says, to stow the swag.
Jemmy, centre-bit, carpet bag are important words. Put good colouring into them.
Here, upon the second landing, he secure may work his will. Down below's a dinner party. Up above, the house is still.
Here, start and extend first finger, remembering to make it waggle slightly as from fear.
Suddenly, in spellbound horror, all his satisfaction ends, for a little white-robed figure by the banister descends.
Enter baby Bella, whose utterances almost need an interpreter.
On the stairs to sit I'm going, till the tarts and delis come. Partington, our butler, always says for baby Bella some.
Yes, thank you. Did Burglar Bill really help to kill off the dramatic recitation? Well, who recites Young Lochinvar nowadays, or The Charge of the Light Brigade, or The Shooting of Dan McGrew? What did enjoy enormous popularity in the 1920s and 30s was the musical monologue. The major publisher of the genre was Reynolds Music, who produced hundreds and hundreds of them, including such well-remembered titles as The Touch of the Master's Hand, My Little Rosa, The Whitest Man I Know, and, still a great favourite, Back Answers.
I'm subject to colds, and they make me quite deaf, and then I can't hear what you say. A fellow once asked me if I'd have a drink, and I heard that with a cold, by the way. As we drank, we got chatting of girls we had met. I described a sweet bird dressed in red. My description was good, and my pal went half mad. It was the girl he was going to wed. He said, I'll punch your head. I said, whose? He said, yours. I said, mine. He said, yes. I said, oh. He said, want to fight? I said, who? He said, you. I said, me. He said, yes. I said, no. So we then got to words, and he said, you're a cad. I said, cad? He said, yes. I said, who? He said, who? I said, yes. He said, you. I said, oh. So, of course, then I knew. The day I got married some years ago, I'll always remember the scene. Me and Jim Lowe married Maudie and Flo, who were twin sisters and always had been. We were married all right at 2:15, but somehow we must have got mixed. Jim said, which is mine? I said, oh, never mind, let's get the blessed thing fixed. have you married Flo? I said, Flo, I don't know, but what if I have? You've got one. He said, I wanted Flo. I said, oh, is that so? Well, your only chance is just gone. He said, did you know that you'd married Flo? I said, no, I don't know that I knew. He said, you've married mine. She's got £10,000. I said, well, never mind, she'll do. A sail on the sea is a thing that suits me, and I've done some sailing, it's true. I've been at my wit's end when sailing to Land's End, and one night when I'd had one or two, the captain came out on the bridge and said, lads, we are doomed, the old tub's going down. To the boats, every man except you. I said, me? He said, yes, there's no room, you must drown. I said, drown? He said, drown. The old ship's going down. Don't stand arguing there. I've just told you straight, there's no room for you, mate, in the boats, or in fact anywhere. I know it's upsetting, but what's the use fretting? We might have lost all of the crew. But now, as I say, we can all get away and only lose one, and that's you.
Rob Wilton, the confidential comic, broadcasting live from Blackpool in 1956. In radio's infancy, it was soon appreciated that an ideal framework for a humorous wireless act was the telephone conversation. Tom Clare, Joe Hayman, Jean de Cassilis, and Vic Wise were just some of the many performers who used this device. Another was Bob Newhart.
Yeah, who is it, Murray? Sir Walter Raleigh from the colonies. Oh, yeah, put him on, will you? Harry? Yeah, you want to pick up the extension? It's Nutty Wall again. Hi, Walt, baby. How are you, guy? How's everything going? Things are fine here, Walt. What is it this time, Walt? You got another winner for us, do you? Tobacco. What's tobacco, Walt? It's a kind of leaf. And you bought 80 tons of it. Let me get this straight now, Walt. You bought 80 tons of leaves? This may come as kind of a surprise to you, Walt, but come fall in England here, we're kind of up to our... It isn't that kind of leaf. What is it, a special food of some kind, is it, Walt? Not exactly. It has a lot of different uses. Like what are some of the uses, Walt? Are you saying snuff, Walt? What's snuff? You take a pinch of tobacco and you shove it up your nose. And it makes you sneeze, huh? I imagine it would, Walt, yeah. Gee, goldenrod seems to do it pretty well over here, Walt. It has some other uses, though. You can chew it, or put it in a pipe, or you can shred it up and put it on a piece of paper and roll it up. Don't tell me, Walt. Don't tell me. You stick it in your ear, right, Walt? All between your lips. Well, then what do you do to it, Walt? You set fire to it, Walt.
Bob Newhart. Another American monologuist of international distinction was the eminent dithyuse Ruth Draper, who toured her one-woman shows for 40 years until a few days before her death in 1956 at the age 72. Ruth Draper's London debut was in 1920, and she was instantly acclaimed as a very great artist indeed, with an ability to populate an empty stage which bordered on the uncanny.
Hello, Foxy. How are you, Fergus, you darling? I'm so glad you're here. Oh, I know it's the luckiest thing you are here because I brought you the most wonderful present. I've got you a Brazilian lunar moth. It's the most beautiful thing. Well, I knew you wanted one for your collection, and I had a friend in Rio, and so I wrote to him, and I said, please to send me the finest Brazilian lunar moth in captivity. Wait till you see it. Have you added a lot to your collection? Oh, I'll never forget that time we went out last year, and I fell in the swamp and lost all your precious butterflies, and you were so sweet about it. You really did forgive me. Will you let me come again someday? Oh, I'd love to, some morning before breakfast. You're the only person I know who gets up early enough. Oh, that'd be wonderful. I'd love to. Do, sit next to me dinner tonight. Please do, because I'll bring down the moth, and I'll give it to you. I know you'll just adore it. Oh, children, must you go to bed? Just as I come. Listen, come to my room while I'm dressing. I'll be there in about 5 minutes. Just tap on my door, and I got lots of presents for you in my bags, and you can help me unpack. We'll have a lovely time. All right, I'll be waiting for you.
The great Ruth Draper as a Southern belle. A legendary name in the 1920s and 30s for comic monologues was Mariette Edgar, whose muse encompassed such epics as The Runcorn Ferry, The Battle of Hastings, and The Lion and Albert. Stanley Holloway, though a Londoner born and bred, famously adopted Mariette Edgar's flat-footed Lancastrian over-enunciation.
It occurred on the evening before Waterloo, and troops were lined up on parade, and Sergeant inspecting them, he was a terror, of whom every man was afraid, all excepting one man, who was in the front rank, a man by the name of Sam Small, and him and the sergeant were both daggers drawn. They thought naught of each other at all. As Sergeant walked past, he was swinging his arm, and he happened to brush against Sam, and knocking his musket clean out of his hand, it fell to the ground with a slam. Pick it up, said Sergeant, abrupt-like, but cool. But Sam, with a shake of his head, said, seeing as thou knocked it out of me hand, perhaps thou'll pick the thing up instead. Sam, pick up the musket, the sergeant exclaimed with a roar. Sam said, thou knocked it down, right, and thou'll pick it up, or it stays where it is, on the floor. The sound of high words very soon reached the ears of an officer, Lieutenant Bird, who says to the sergeant, now what's all this here? And the sergeant told what had occurred. Sam, pick up the musket, Lieutenant exclaimed with some heat. Sam said he knocked it down, right, and he picks it up, for it stays where it is, at me feet. It caused quite a stir when the captain arrived to find out the cause of the trouble. And every man there, all excepting old Sam, was full of excitement and bubble. Sam, pick up the musket, said Captain, for strictness renowned. Sam said he knocked it down, right, and he picks it up, but it stays where it is on the ground. The same thing occurred when the Major and Colonel both tried to get Sam to see sense. But when old Duke of Wellington came into view, well, then the excitement was tense. Up rode the Duke on a lovely white horse to find out the cause of the bother. He looks at the musket and then at old Sam, and he talked to old Sam like a brother. Sam, pick up the musket. The Duke said, as quiet as could be. Sam, pick up the musket. Come on, lad, just to please me. All right, Duke, said old Sam, just for thee I'll oblige, and to show thee I meant no offence. So Sam picked it up. Greatly, lad, said the Duke. Righto, boys, let battle commence.
Old Sam, spoken by its author Stanley Holloway, a recitation typical of the style and times, and owing much to Marriott Edgar. Another distinctive versifier, but one who owed nothing to anybody, was Cyril Fletcher. The appeal of his odd odes was in no small part due to his distinctive Cour Anglais speaking voice, which could pounce on an innocent home county's vowel like a hawk on a field mouse and mangle it into East End mincemeat.
This is the tale of Eliza Tweet, who strolled one night along the street, picking with dainty fingertips a fourpenny place and two of chips, wrapped in a sheet of news which seemed to have pictures which were most rethemed. Then suddenly, in such a flutter, she threw her chips out in the gutter, for on that greasy paper there was the answer to her maiden's prayer, as underneath her piece of place was Cyril Fletcher's smiling face, though where the vinegar had trickled, his features were a trifle pickled. But Liza loved it just the same, and put it in a faux frame. And now at bedtime has to pause, for Cyril's on her chest of drawers. She turns his face round to the wall, while she takes off her wherewithal, then dons her nightie neat and plain, and shyly turns him round again. And then she murmurs, "Good night, Duck," and kisses where a chip has stuck, which mars his classic lips so chaste, and gives them such a funny taste. And then she tells him she'll be true, and swears he answers, "I kid you," then jumps in bed to take her rest, with Cyril clutched against her breast, and whispers, "Now I hope to be dreaming no more love of thee."
Since Cyril Fletcher's heyday, there has really only been one comic poet to keep the oriflamme flying. The entrancing Pam Ayres, whose deceptively simple verses are so often witty, warm and wise.
I wish I'd looked after me teeth and spotted the dangers beneath. Oh, the toffees I chewed and the sweet sticky food. Oh, I wish I'd looked after me teeth. I wish I'd been that much more willing when I had more tooth there than filling to give up gobstoppers from respect to me choppers and to buy something else with me shilling. When I think of the lollies I licked and the licorice all sorts I picked, sherbet dabs, big and little, or that hard peanut brittle, my conscience gets horribly pricked. Well, my mother, she told me no end. If you've got a tooth, you've got a friend. I was young then and careless. My toothbrush was airless. I never had much time to spend. Well, I showed him the toothpaste all right. I flashed it about late at night. But up and down brushing and poking and fussing didn't seem worth the time I could bite. If I'd known I was paving the way to cavities, caps and decay, the murder of fillings, injections and drillings, I'd have thrown all my sherbet away. So I lie in the old dentist's chair and I gaze up his nose in despair. And his drill it do whine in these molars of mine, to amalgam, you'll say, for in there. How I laughed at my mother's false teeth as they foamed in the waters beneath. But now comes the reckoning. It's me they are beckoning. Oh, I wish I'd looked after me teeth.
Back to the home counties, Hertfordshire, to meet the only professional monologuist who was not only knighted, but also raised to the peerage, Bernard Miles.
But I had a tidy good education. I could read when I was 18, only of course not to understand it. Not like that old Miss Piggott what used to play the organ. I hated the sights of her. I couldn't abide her. They reckon her dad was a big army gentleman left over from the mutinies. But she was very hot on the temperance. I mind she seed my barrow stood outside the Rose and Cream one time. I'd been over to get some bean sticks from by the crab tree, and I stood my barrow outside the Rose and Crown, and she seen it stood there. So I sees her on the Tuesday, and she starts off at me. She says, I seed your barrow stood outside the Rose and Crown. She says, that's intemperance, she says. Look not upon the wine when it is red, she says, 'cause at the last it biteth like a serpent and stingeth like a adder. Proverbs 25, 31 and 32. But I said, I was never inside the Rose and Cream. I said, I never come near her. And she says, I seed your barrow stood outside. She says, that's intemperance, that's intemperance. So I seed it wasn't no good argufying. I touched me hat and I said, good afternoon. About 3 or 4 days afterwards, I left my barrow stood outside her front door all night. That had her.
Bernard Miles, the uncrowned king of the Chiltern Hills. If Britain ever produced anyone of the stature of Ruth Draper, it must be Joyce Grenfell. Her sketches, delicately yet strongly and most affectionately drawn, earned her a place unique in public esteem. Like Ruth Draper, she wrote all her own material and performed solo, with a minimum of props and accessories. And, like Ruth Draper, she peopled the stage with a certitude and a command which kept her audiences in thrall.
Artist room. The scene takes place in the artist's room at the back of a concert hall just after a piano recital has happened. And various friends and acquaintances come round to see him, and here, first of all, are a pair of orchestra tickets. Delia, darling, don't let's push. I'm absolutely exhausted after all that lovely, lovely music. Let's just sit for a minute, shall we? Oh, I thought he played so well, didn't you? But you know, I did think that Beethoven was a tiny bit on the long side. Well, he does go on so, Beethoven, doesn't he, bless his heart? Just when you think he's finished, the entire thing starts again. But I'm glad it was such a success, because he is such a nice little man. Oh, he couldn't be sweeter. I know him quite well. Well, you know Millie Medlow Sims. Well, she has these Sunday evenings, and one goes in, and she knows a lot of amusing people. Oh, actors and writers and painters and politicians and things. And one sits in lovely, lovely chairs and listens to lovely, lovely music. And that's where I met little, what's his name? You know, Millie, she is so intelligent and she's so sweet about it. I mean, if there is somebody there who plays, she goes up to them quite casually and she says, now look, I'm not going to be a bully because I hate bullies. But we're all dying to hear you play. And there's my piano. Do play. And they usually do. No, darling, she doesn't pay them. Oh, no, I mean, you know, the whole thing's just great fun. It couldn't be more informal. One goes on talking. You know, I don't know how anybody manages without music in their life. Well, I think it's just part of me. I just sit back and let the whole thing pour over me. I suppose in a way that's what I don't like about Beethoven. I mean, he just doesn't pour, does he? Look, I do believe if I was to do a little pushing, I could get over there and have a tiny word in his ear, because he'd never forgive me if I didn't. It's just one of those tiresome things one has to do. No, darling, don't you bother. You just wait here. I'll get it over as quickly as I can, but I must just... Hello, I can't tell you how heavenly it was. I had to come dashing round right away to tell you how heavenly it was. I don't know whether you do happen to remember, but we did meet with Millie Medley Sims in the dim, dark ages, and I just felt I must come and say hello and tell you how heavenly it was. Look, I do wish you'd telephone me sometime. I'm in the book. Well, will you? And then you can come round to my house and we'll all make music madly together. Well, now, don't forget, that's a promise. I can't tell you how heavenly it was. It couldn't have been more heavenly. It was absolutely heavenly.
The incomparable and much-loved Joyce Grenfell. Here in Britain, the monologue has of late been given a facelift by the poems and sharply etched characterizations of the likes of John Hegley, Morwenna Banks, Steve Coogan, and Victoria Wood, just 4 of the many performers currently demonstrating that the well of inventiveness is by no means dry. From our earliest days, huddled in caves, the storyteller has been cherished as the repository of tribal history, myth, and legend. Young children like nothing more than to be read to, no matter how familiar the story. And in our adult maturity, the yearning fades but little. One voice, one person, compelling, fascinating, representing everyone and everywhere, limited only by imagination, our imagination. To conclude this survey, a virtuoso performance by a celebrated raconteur, tuba maestro, spoof concert promoter, and all-round eccentric. A gloriously plummy voice steers us through the twists and turns of an increasingly bizarre story. So, ladies and gentlemen, with your kind permission, here now to conduct a masterclass in the art of the monologue is Mr. Gerard Hoffnung.
A striking lesson in keeping the upper lip stiff is, now wait, is given in a recent number of the weekly bulletin of the Federation of Civil Engineering Contractors, which prints the following letter from a bricklayer in Golders Green to the firm for whom he worked. Respected sir, when I got to the top of the building, I found that the hurricane had knocked some bricks off the top. So I rigged up a beam with a pulley at the top of the building and hoisted up a couple of barrels full of bricks. When I had fixed the building, there was a lot of bricks left over. I hoisted the barrel back up again and secured the line at the bottom, and then went up, listen, and filled the barrel with extra bricks. Then I went to the bottom and cast off the line. Unfortunately, the barrel of bricks was heavier than I was. And before I knew what was happening, the barrel started down, jerking me off the ground. I decided to hang on. And halfway up, I met the barrel coming down. And received a severe blow on the shoulder. I then continued to the top. Banging my head against the beam. And getting my fingers jammed in the pulley. When the barrel hit the ground, It burst at its bottom, allowing all the bricks to spill out. I was no heavier than the barrel. And so started down again at high speed. Halfway down, I met the barrel coming up. And received severe injury to my shins. When I hit the ground, I landed on the bricks, getting several painful cuts from the sharp edges. At this point, I must have lost my presence of mind. Because I let go the line. The barrel then came down, giving me another heavy blow on the head and putting me in hospital. I respectfully request sick leave.